Campbellton Road corridor. We at NPUS think that it should be BRT only because we are anticipating that that is the most expedient and the most cost-efficient method of employment on Campbellton Road. The opportunity for it to actually happen is what we are looking for, as opposed to something pie in the sky. I also want to remind you that this is the section of Campbellton Road right by Fort McPherson. This is an area that needs to be immediately determined on alignment. There are only 2 lanes and no sidewalks in this area, but it is Campbellton Road. It is at least 6/10 to 8/10 of a mile from the back gate of Fort McPherson all the way to Stanton. And at that point, you need to be able to consider the fact that this is property that needs to be purchased, or at this present time, before it is purchased by a developer and allowed to become a greater expense for the city. It is now time for the city to take possession of the property by whatever means for a corridor to make the transportation system, whether it's BRT or LRT, there is going to need to be more roadway. And we need to allow the city planners and the city to plan our streets and transportation system and stop letting the developers who are only wanting to line their pockets to decide how things go, so that we don't end up, it's 2 lanes here now, 1 in each direction. We don't want to end up with a Bill Kennedy Way fiasco. Thank you.
And that's District 12, so thank you for coming down here again. In District 12, we actually have the Transportation Department creating a transportation plan directly for that area that you're talking about. So we're already on it. Thank you for coming down here today. The next person we have coming up will be Miss Mona Mohammed from Greenbrier Mall.
Good morning. So my name is Mona Mohammed. I am a Southwest Atlanta native and a 26-year-old business owner inside of Greenbrier Mall. The Perfect Dress Atlanta has been there for over 3 years now, and today I'm here to ask the City Council's help to make sure that I am not only accomplishing my personal goals, but the goals that MARTA set for the community a few years ago for bringing LRT. And focusing on my community a little bit this year, it's really seeing that my community has been neglected. I'm not saying that it's the city's fault for the neglection, but there hasn't been the same amount of growth in my community compared to the city as a whole. And together we can achieve this by making sure MARTA continues their initial plan to bring LRT to the Campbellton Road corridor. This investment can bring many job opportunities for the future, and also from building the process and the many corporations that will be coming to the community, which would be newly invested. Currently, MARTA is substituting one promise with another and wowing the community with promises of beautifying the area if we go with BRT. This is new to me. You guys had that town hall meeting at the church, and that was my introduction to this whole project. And seeing the process and seeing how everything is going, I wouldn't take them credible for these promises because the cost of everything is going up. And when they came to the church again a few weeks ago, they did say that LRT is now a little $400 million, and the last time I did ask him for the expected cost now due to inflation and everything else of how much it actually would be, because it wouldn't be the $350 million that they had projected in the beginning, as well as BRT that they're saying would only cost $150 million, and at this point, is that an accurate description of the cost? And I do see it in the future becoming oh, it actually costed X amount, and that because it costed X amount, we cannot give you guys the promised investments such as sidewalks and many other things. And I do not want my community to be blindsided by this. There's no doubt in my mind that the city would not invest in the area if and when needed. If we need sidewalks, if we go with LRT. And the city could, of course, come in and help us getting the sidewalks to make sure that this investment goes really well. Currently, the bus route that rides on Campbellton Road is the second most used bus route daily, and with that high volume, why would they not consider giving the community the new modern light rail that would give opportunities throughout the city for the riders? This is an impactful investment, and this investment will be in an area that is predominantly black, essentially. I really hate to bring that up, but this would be something that is invested in a predominantly black community, and I do not want this predominantly black community to be neglected and should be a part of the project of the other 5 that are continuing with LRT. That's about it.
Ms. Mohammed, thank you again for coming down here again, and I want to be known that most of the comments, public comments, came from folks concerned about Campbellton Road. I heard y'all again, and I'm standing with you. Thank you again. Next on our agenda is presentations. Today we have one from the Atlanta Department of Transportation. Is the department ready to present? Good to see you, brother. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Mr. Vice Chair. Josh Rowan, Commissioner, Atlanta Department of Transportation. It's our second quarterly update for the calendar year, last one for the fiscal year. And so for those of you who are new to this committee, we have quite a track record, as Councilmember Overstreet would attest, of running long on our presentations. This one will not do that. This is going to hit a few key hot buttons and allow ample time for questions. So on the agenda for today, we like to start every meeting with a safety moment. Our motto is safety is our business. And you're going to find the safety moment is tied directly to the lighting update. As you recall, you had an update 2 weeks ago about the city's lighting audit. A lot has happened on that front and was happening. We're very active with the pothole posse, and you'll find in that portion of the update that I can't stop alliterating now that the pothole posse is back. I use as many words that begin with P as I possibly can. And then I want to share, as we get into, we have actually had the last month of collection on the city's first T-SPLOS program. We have some lessons that have been learned, and you'll find that I have a slide chock full of text like a good engineer would do, and those are our lessons learned. And so we will jump right into it. Why lighting? Why was that such a big deal to us? One, it was a bit of a haphazard system as to how we added it within the system, within the city. We were confused by it. And so the deeper we dug in, we started seeing study after study after study saying that this is one of the highest impact things you can do, both from a crime perspective and from a traffic perspective. I'm a transportation guy, so I will focus on the transportation side. But you can see at night the fatality rate is 3 times that of the daytime. And so roughly the same people, same numbers, lose their lives during the day and at night, but because the volumes are so much lower at night, that rate ends up being 3 times higher. So the nighttime is very deadly. And you can see that illuminating corridors, those next 3 bullet points, you see a 42% reduction in the pedestrian fatality rate. And I won't read those to you, but major improvements through work that in the grand scheme of things is not difficult to implement. And so that was where we started down the path of the light up the night. I want to show you some data because, one, we're data nerds, and 2, we think these maps really tell a story. This came from our planning and strategy team. They just finished updating the city's 5-year crash history. We actually led with a similar slide when we were introducing Vision Zero as legislation to the city of Atlanta. But you can see that the yellow are serious injury crashes, and the red, which kind of looks pink from here, are the fatalities. And one of the things I would say is if the Moreland Avenue corridor is not declared a public safety, public health crisis, then we're really missing the mark. It's quite a challenge for us by statute, state routes or truck routes. It's a quickly developing area. One of the members of the community earlier spoke about Bill Kennedy Way. Those are the challenges we're seeing where interstates are now connecting directly to urban villages. And these are going to continue to be problems, and we see that this data really pans out, and we want to be addressing these issues. Another way to look at it is this is a busy map, but the next one, the heat map, really tells the story. And you can start seeing where the challenges lie. The hottest spot, again, being Moreland. We've spent a good bit of time on Donnelly-Hollowell. I know that's a state issue that they're moving forward, but we had said a couple years back between Hollowell and Moreland, those are two that we really want to get our arms around. I'm not satisfied we have our arms around Moreland. That's probably the most complex issue, safety issue we have right now. On to the streetlights. We do know that adding streetlights will have an immediate benefit. There's been a little confusion, and it's been the facing that we've sort of the inside baseball semantics, and then the number 10,000. A year ago, we came before this body asking for permission to hire Georgia Power to evaluate our system, and they did that. We called that Phase 0, and they found every light that we owned, determined whether or not they were functioning, and that we used that data to make a lot of our decisions as we negotiated essentially a deal to sell them our lights. Phase 1, we're going to talk about a little bit more today. We're selling, roughly speaking, 10,000 lights to Georgia Power. They're going to own them, operate them, maintain them, fix the ones that are broken, and upgrade them to LEDs. So that is about to become their issue. Phase 2 isn't even in place yet. That's the interstate lighting. We have to renegotiate the maintenance agreement. They're actually agreeing to continue maintenance while we finish up these first efforts on the Light Up the Night. And then Phase 3 are the additional lights that we are adding. To date, I think I put the number 2,000 in here. It's probably closer to 2,700 have already been added. 2,300 are in the pipeline, and then we're going to hit the pause button and make sure we get the right locations for the last 5,000. But a pretty significant move on the lights. And so this was a graphic prepared by Georgia Power in the audit. You can see our city-owned lights really cover a pretty healthy portion of downtown and midtown. And so when you look at the numbers that weren't functioning, the audit found that 12% were not functioning, that this is a big deal. These are lights that are going to be repaired, upgraded, and will be functioning again. And so that's a business that the Atlanta Department of Transportation is going to hire experts to do. We are getting out of the lighting business. And so to wrap up on the lighting side, most of this I've said previously, but we looked very heavily and relied upon crash rates and crime rates. That was our decision factor. And we didn't sit down and say, we think we need 5 lights in these locations. You know, and to Mr. Vice Chair, much like when we rode at 3 in the morning, you highlighted some hot spots that were our hot spots. Georgia Power is evaluating the Cleveland Avenue area. And I was actually at a friend's house a couple weeks ago in Princeton Lakes and was leaving and just happened to turn on to Fairburn the very moment that the streetlights popped on. And it was really exciting to see just how well they were not only illuminating the street, but how the right spots were picked. And we'd even turned down a few side roads to tie everything in together. And it was just a really good thing to see. And I used to live down that way and know how dark that corridor gets at night. So, again, between what's installed, what's in the hopper, that's about 5,000, I'm sorry. We're going to kickstart the maintenance side of this. Georgia Power is ready to roll once we get the agreement signed that gives them possession of our assets. We're calling that the Maintenance Blitz. And what's really fun to me is that I think this is a model going forward because this was a citywide focus, citywide effort. And if you do the math on the value of the lighting program, we're accomplishing in 18 to 24 months what would have taken us probably a decade to do by ourselves. And so those are the things we have to look at. How do we get creative with project delivery? How do we get creative with project financing? And how do we lean on our partners? I do want to make a quick comment. I don't necessarily mean to dredge it up, but I struggle when Atlanta is compared to other cities. I think those are dangerous comparisons. And 2 weeks ago, there was a comparison made Atlanta to Chicago. Atlanta takes 30 days to repair its streetlights. Chicago takes 4.5. That's true. Chicago's Department of Transportation is 2 times the city's general fund, $1.4 billion. Their Office of Electrical Services, which is streetlights and signals, is 268 FTEs, a $35 million organization. We're a $50 million department. Our signal shop and sign and streetlight crew, roughly speaking, maybe 30 people. And so I would turn that 12% around. 88% were working with 3 people maintaining them. And so I'm actually going to give a commendation, the first ever commissioner's commendation to the 3 people who vigilantly maintained those streetlights and kept 88% of them functioning. I mean, really, they deserve an award. They're proud of the work they do. They show up every day. They're excited about taking care of the city. And we need the help on the signal side anyway, so their skills are really going to be put to use. But I would urge us to use caution when we compare ourselves to other major cities, because those are unfair comparisons. We're not New York, we're not Chicago, we're not San Francisco. And I'm trying not to giggle at that, but the thank goodness comment resonates. But it's hard when you're comparing a grape to a watermelon, when you're comparing a carrot to a pine tree. There aren't really good comparisons there, but our folks do a good job. And when I saw that 12% were not functioning, I'm not surprised. So we get a B+. I can live with that. We're about to move into the A. So now we get to the pothole posse portion of the presentation. And I will work as many P's into this part of the presentation as possible, because I feel like Dr. Seuss standing here. I don't know, it's fun to say. This is an important chart. It's one that we all get early on as nerds in the civil engineering program, but our pavements are really meant to last about 25 to 30 years. Much of the pavement we have in the city of Atlanta is on borrowed time, and we need to really think about, again, citywide initiatives and how do we get creative with the financing. And you can see from the blue curve that the deterioration starts pretty rapidly as you get into about year 20, 25 in the life cycle. To the far right, I've added those arrows that, if you recall from when we launched the Department of Transportation, our data shows that 60% of the streets are fair or below. And so it's important that we do this maintenance work. It's very important because we're extending lifespans. We don't have traditional potholes like a northern city does. I can't recall the last time it was cold enough in Atlanta to freeze water a foot below the pavement. But we actually have hot weather potholes. Pavements crack, water seeps in, and just the beating of the traffic. Many of our streets, as we've developed, were never intended to carry the loads that they carry now. And the thing you see a lot in this city is what we call alligator cracking. It looks like an alligator back, and generally that's a subgrade failure, that's a water issue, or it's just heavy trucks beating thin pavement up. And so we need to step back and look at not only how do we preserve, but how do we get ahead of what's just nature does to our assets. I've shared with others that I do think that one of the best things that we could do for our streets is take a step back and look at drainage. Much of our damage is water related, and how do we manage the issues we have with runoff in a time where storms are more frequent and more severe. So this is a tough one. It just seems like pavement. How hard can it be? But it's a very complex issue that I think is pressing. There's another P for you. It's a pressing pavement issue. These are some numbers from the work that the crews have done. I estimated that they would get about 30 a day. Obviously, I shot low. It was not intentional. I actually you'll see in a second, I took our 3-year performance data, just calculated how many work days there were and got 30. We're up over 50. One thing I would share for my 12 fans who are watching online or on TV, we can't get the 311 number over 200. Submit them. If you need help, we'll throw 311 parties with you. It's no offense to us. I was actually with Councilmember Bakhtiari about a month ago, and there was a stretch of street where the community had gone out and marked all the pavement issues, but had never called them in. So we had about 100 right there that I submitted. And so right now I think I may be one of the more active people submitting those, but would love to find opportunities. If folks don't know how to do it, we take no offense at it. It's a great partnership opportunity. We have 3 crews running, and we're happy to come in. And what we found is if we focus on specific corridors, let's go one end to the other. We did that on West Paces Ferry. We ended up spending about 2.5 months on West Paces Ferry just trying to fix everything we could find that was wrong. I know all of you have those type of corridors, and let's set up some time to go walking. But the numbers are looking good. The crews are producing, as they always do. If you haven't seen it, the event where Mayor Dickens came out, there was a picture that the media picked up on, which was the mayor and the crews. We want to have posters made of that, because that was just an awesome photo. And I was so proud as we stood there, and the guys on the crews were getting calls from their wives saying, "Honey, you were on the news today." And just to see the value that was placed in the work that they do, that was really quite an amazing thing to see. And they show up every day and they bust their tails. And it's 3 crews knocking this stuff out. So they're really getting down to business. So this is a little bit of a look back. We ironically, we went back to my first day at the City of Atlanta. And our data guru, Jordan Dowdy, who I'm sure many of you have met, he actually went through the 311 system and mapped every pothole we had fixed in about a 3-year period. 19,434, so just a few. I'll share the engineer in me cries a little bit when I see that number, but it's showing that we're staying on top of the maintenance side. What I like, though, is, again, if you switch it over to a heat map, you see where the areas of focus are. Now, I will stand here today, and I don't want to cause intra-squad rivalry, but I will stand here today, and based on just my visual time in the streets, I think the South Side is underrepresented. And so I think I'm going to go spend some more time down there turning some in. Now, it may very well be the North Side is underrepresented as well, but it's not quite as dense up there. Their issues are actually a little different. They're getting pounded by the commuting traffic a little harder than others. But it was interesting in District 8. I used to ride my bike with former Councilmember Matzagite. Everything east-west was torn up. Everything north-south was in fine shape. And so we're in a weird space where a lot of our pavement damage isn't even done by us. It's carrying the load of the region. And we have funding formulas for pavement that are based on population and lane miles. I'm not going to give an editorial comment, but I think you know what I'm thinking without me saying it. When you have a region converging on a city, we certainly aren't all driving to Hackworth every day. So that's something we've got to talk about. But I do believe the South Side is underrepresented there. Let's help people figure out how to get their calls in. I prefer social media. I find that that's the shortest line, and it comes straight to us. So we like these heat maps because we think it puts things in perspective. It also shows the value of our Midtown area. A lot of activity going on down there. This is a fun slide for me because, gosh, this time 2 years ago, pandemic had just hit us. Our revenue collection had really tanked. We ran a scenario. We literally dropped from about $5 million a month to just a little more than $2 million. And we ran a scenario that what if we only did $2 million the rest of the way? And it was bleak. And what we decided is let's not overreact to 1 month. Let's not overreact to 1 quarter, but let's wisely start looking at scopes and budgets and because what we didn't want to do was cut projects. We wanted to just make it work. And then that fall of 20, you're going to see, and you've seen these numbers before, it started rebounding. And so April of this year was actually the last month of T-SPLOS 1.0. And the whole time we have been essentially budgeting with a revenue projection of about 270. We landed at 300. And so, one of the things that Mayor Bottoms did is she went ahead and said, well, 15 of that, tag it for Campbellton. So as we talk Campbellton, just know the city has $15 million sitting in the Campbellton budget for whatever's needed to support MARTA. There's no real scope tied to it. Our thought is it may be needed at some point to match federal funding, but it was one of her parting shots to move $15 million over to Campbellton and say just keep it there because it'll be needed down the road. And so we have done that. But you can see 303, the proposed program, we use 300 with some inflation escalators. So I think we're at a really good number revenue-wise, both this program and proposed. And I'll tell you, that is the most important number. You're kind of managing into the dark. It's just a series of guesses that you're fine-tuning based upon actual collections. I was honestly thinking in summer 2020 we would probably hit 270, 275. And we kept pressing against that. And this past year has been phenomenal. So I know I'm therapy shopping, so apparently others are too, because we've seen a real uptick on the revenue side. So I don't know that I need to read all of these, but I tried to sit down in advance of this presentation and just talk about what are the things we really need to focus on going forward. And I know that we have proposed legislation from Councilmember Westmoreland to talk about that are putting the bumpers on the next program, wisely so. And I would say for any group that's going to be providing oversight or the needed transparency, this is a good list to start from. As many recall, we really fought hard early on to get our overhead percentage down. We in fact undercooked it a little bit to get it as close to 12% as we could. I think we can run at 10 to 12% very easily. A big one that we focused on was design as percent of construction. And so we wanted to open that up to competition. And in opening it up to competition, we feel it also opens it up to small and disadvantaged firms. And we've got plenty of work. We have hundreds of projects. And so there's plenty for everyone. One of the things I would share is this is a time for new firms to be thinking about spinning up. When this passes, there will be plenty of work. A key factor was holding the designer accountable that their design hit our budget. So the design to budget, that's stolen from the facility side. Architects are that's their way of life. We brought that in. One that paid off is we were very pessimistic about revenue, and it turned out we have a little bit at the end. And we want you to know there's a little bit at the end. And we brought in a lot of best practices from other areas. I think the best being the T-SPLOS budget book. It doesn't look like much, but it basically has every project category, every project, each project broken down by PE, utilities, right-of-way, construction, and admin. And what that allows us to do is you can actually monitor all the changes. And one of our goals, if you go back to day one, was to just do what we say we're going to do and be as transparent as possible. And so you can follow the money. It's on the website. The budget book is the handiest tool. It doesn't drill multiple layers down, but we can drill multiple layers down and provide that data. It's all out there to be seen. We're constantly looking at what we call trigger to NTP. It's just the contracting process that the city has. That's something that always needs to be evaluated because there's room for improvement without a doubt. And then I think that the last couple things that I would share is that we've learned that community engagement was an evolutionary process. My very first presentation I gave, I talked about PIC, Program Controls, Innovation, and Community Engagement. And I'm happy Sherry Williams is here because she talked about you need to go high-tech and old school. And I think we got more value out of the old school. I've gone through a couple pairs of shoes walking neighborhoods with people. And the things you learn and the relationships you build actually have helped us deliver projects. And so I wanted to put all these thoughts down because I think these are the lessons we've learned. We don't want to stray from them. And even if you go back to projects like, I remember Councilmember Overstreet when we were struggling to get your bridge finished, and we did the after-action review. And we had to come fess up and say, here are the things that went right, here are the things we have to improve upon, and that's there. We did the same thing on Powers Ferry, did an after-action review on that one, and we're going to share, here's what we did right, here's what we did wrong, here's where we can improve, and here are the opportunities for growth. So I think these are important lessons. The city's really postured well going into the future because, having done this for a while, my two younger brothers will tell you the first pancake always gets a little messed up. I being the oldest one, that's a direct shot at me. So it's always the second and the third one that turn out right. And I think my brother's tweeting right now saying, making fun of me for hiring the wrong Rowan at the City of Atlanta. So just know that the first one can be a little messy, but the second, we learn the lessons, and the second and the third one turn out just fine. We've been talking a lot about our values, and I wanted to wrap that up because there's a picture I'm going to show you that is so meaningful to me. The scope of the work was very simple, but it was what the work stated to the community. So we started off talking about safety as our business, which you all have heard that before, and it is. The safety of our people, the safety of the people who use our streets. We're a service organization. We represent the taxpayer. We handle the taxpayer's money. That's important. That gets us into stewardship. We don't have 100% of the resources we need to do 100% of the work. That's never going to be the case in infrastructure. So we have to look at what's our highest ROI. And then the fourth value we added this year, which was speed. And speed tells us we have to do more in-house. And that's what we've been moving towards, is how do we do simple projects in-house? And we've started doing some safety improvements, the first one being at Habersham Valley, that was 100% in-house design, 100% in-house delivered. We did in 45 days what probably would have taken us 18 months if we had gone to the outside. Our guys are really capable of delivering. And it was just learning how to take the different maintenance groups and pull them together. And actually we call it the commissioner's list. We have about 20 of these that we're going to try to get out and say, what, we can build them ourselves. And the deal that I made with our operations and maintenance team was, well, if you screw it all up, blame it on me, and then get back out there and rip it up, and you got to do it right the second time. And we did those speed tables in Mosley Park. Those were beautiful. This little project, we turned it around in under 2 months in Buckhead. So we're capable of doing that. When we got the call on a Saturday that our iconic sidewalks had been torn up, we were there Monday morning. And I underestimated what that meant. I knew our guys would get it clean, but I got so many messages saying thank you. Thank you for sending that message. And so I'll just share today that we actually went twice. We'd go 100 times. They can rip them out of the ground and we'll go put them back. And just know when you drive out there and see those 4 steel plates, that was kind of my snarky FU to the people doing that work. Because it's about values. We are an inclusive city, and we do want to be responsive, and we do want people to know. And the folks who did that work, they just didn't get the job done. And that's what it was about. They didn't have to be told. When I called and said, hey, and some of them called me Cap. I said, Cap, we know what you're going to tell us. We'll be there Monday morning. Boom, it was done. And so what you're seeing is really a team that's embraced with the partners. We always want to talk about our partners. We don't work alone. You see the big names at the top, MARTA and GDOT. They're big and at the top for a reason, because everything we do, we're working with one or the other or both. And so really, really positioned well. And so I would just say, well, that may be the last slide. Alexis would be so proud of me because I had to cut and paste her old presentations, and I actually remember to put page numbers on them. So this wraps up the presentation portion, and happy to take any questions.
Any council members have any questions? So I also want to acknowledge that Councilmember Jason Dozier is actually here today, so thank you for coming in. And Councilmember Dozier had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Rowan, for your presentation. I just had a few questions, so I'll just kind of go through one by one. The first one with regards to the pothole posse, the pothole mitigation work that's been ongoing. Can you talk through some of the challenges or opportunities? I know we have some streets that are concrete and most of our streets are asphalt, but I imagine the maintenance challenges are different for both of those street types. Can you talk through some of the challenges with the pothole?
I certainly can, because we have a number of districts that have some residential areas with concrete streets that have completely failed. And that is a total structural failure. And the fix to that is to tear it out and build it back. And they're especially problematic. I was with Councilmember Hillis Friday, and he always rides me through a couple of his neighborhoods. I know District 8 has some. I know your district has some. Was in District 10. This has kind of been the week for broken concrete. We can certainly dig pieces of it up and patch them. But at the end of the day, by the time that concrete cracks and settles, it's really the subgrade, the dirt underneath it that has failed. And so we're essentially building a land bridge, and that'll crack and sink and crack and sink. We've got to pull it out and fix the underlying problem. And so those are big. They're expensive. The one I would point to is actually the concrete portion of RDA in your district, Councilmember Lewis. We try to keep it propped up, but it really needs to be torn out and redone. And so concrete's very durable when done right. Once the subgrade starts failing, I tell people concrete's like chalk. Squeeze it, it's hard, but snap it, it's real easy to break.
And I guess thinking through the route they would have now, the example, I know it's on the project list for T-SPLOST 2.0 for a safe street upgrade. How does that work in a situation where you do have a concrete street? Does that increase the cost of the project, I'm assuming, or would that include remediation of the concrete?
Yeah, so we would be looking just more at repair in those. The safety focus is going to be the pedestrian accessibility, really crossing the street safely. But you have a number of areas that, for example, where you have multiple lanes, the lanes that the trucks are running in have the most damage. And some of those slabs just need to be taken out and replaced. It would be very similar to how GDOT does the interstate slab replacement. They're not out tearing up the whole interstate, but they're fixing the worst slabs that are starting to break and fail. And we need to be looking at doing that. That's actually, I also believe, something that we're capable of doing in-house. It's not the most complex work. It's just messy.
Gotcha. For the streetlights, as we are identifying streetlights for repair, for upgrade, does that by default mean that if it's a high pressure sodium bulb that gets upgraded to LED, or would that be a replacement of the? Yeah,
so we don't have many of those, but the ones that we do still have will soon be gone. Okay. Everything will be LED.
Okay. And then for all the different projects that we're going to be doing through T-SPLOST 2.0, through the infrastructure bond, so forth and so on, even if we have all the money today up front, do you foresee any challenges with getting projects delivered on time due to whether it's labor constraints, supply chain constraints, contracting issues, or procurement issues? Is that baked into?
Yeah, let me start with kind of the end of the list first. The biggest threat on the material side, I believe, is the price of oil. And so years ago, GDOT changed their specification where asphalt prices index with the price of oil. And so our contractors are not taking as much risk. And you think about it, they're giving us a bid today for paving that may not happen for 2 years. That's a big gamble right there. And I think that's some risk that we can help offset. And so we've adopted that same approach that the GDOT implemented, where we index those prices. We have seen in some of the steel work that the prices are fluctuating pretty wildly. There may be an opportunity to talk about further indexing. And so it really is an exercise in risk management. Apart from that, it's just going to be your typical transportation infrastructure woes. The thing you'll see is these projects are intentionally simpler. And so on any job, right-of-way acquisition takes a lot of time. I mean, for anybody who's bought and sold a house, now imagine you have to go out and purchase, 86 parcels of property for one job. It doesn't move fast. Utilities, I mean, we are in a complex urban area, and utility relocation is difficult. We made the strategic decision that we were going to move utilities first and then build. Other agencies will try to build and move at the same time, and I'll tell you what usually happens is your project stalls, and you have to pull off. And there's nothing more frustrating than a project that's 30% built, and then you move off of it for a year. We're trying to move that risk to the front so that anything utilities related we're catching before the clock is really rolling on our contractor. And then, like I mentioned on the lessons learned, competition's a really good thing. We had, when I came in, we had an instrument which was a pre-qualified group of contractors. The intent was to make things go a little faster. We've 99% thrown that out. Everything needs to be open bid. Open bid, best value is important. There's a tendency for some to go really low on their bid prices. You're not getting a 40% discount. You're setting yourself up for several years of headaches. Project delivery plans are important. Safety plans are important. The history of performance at the city and other jurisdictions is important. And we started measuring prices against our engineer's estimate. And that caused a little consternation. But at the end of the day, you want a good price for the work, and competition's a really good thing. And we've talked before, and we never really quite got to it. I think you're going to see it in the second program. Many of these projects are intentionally smaller and more numerous because what I want to see are more DBE firms pop up. And we've said we will make these jobs as small as they have to be to give people opportunities. We don't want to set firms up for failure. Now, it's a bit of an administrative challenge on our end because we will be doing more procurement and managing more contracts. But when we talk about, I mean, I think 2.0 is over $200 million in sidewalks. I mean, we could start a sidewalk contracting company. Not heavy in the right-of-way, not heavy in the utilities. You need some good traffic control, and you need a good crew. And so I think there are going to be tremendous opportunities in this next program, both for business development and just for good people to get good jobs. And don't forget that what we learned at the City of Atlanta, our friends at the state, you know, they only do about $1 billion worth of work a year, and that's just projected for the next decade. So what we wanted to be was sort of a learning ground. Come do a good job for us, we'll help you get there, and then move on to some of these bigger projects. I think that opportunity exists, but you're always going to have the pain and the suffering of utilities are a pain in the neck. Right-of-way can be a pain in the neck. You'll find that wait till some of these bigger construction projects start and the contractor pops a gas line or hits a water line. I mean, that kind of stuff happens. But we're moving into a phase. I mean, if you just drive around today, you see crews working. Things are moving. Things are getting done. I'm just tickled every time I drive by the Bankhead Bridge and see that thing coming down. That's long overdue. That decrepit old thing is going to be replaced at some point with a great pedestrian connection. And so I think to your point of lesson learned, there is risk. And the city has to be prepared to shoulder some of that risk. If we put it all on the contractors, it's just going to increase prices. But at the same time, if we're an inviting owner for competition, I think you're going to see a lot of good things happen. So that was kind of a long answer to a very simple question, but you can tell I spent a lot of time on the risk side of things.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that answer. It's something, and I joke with Councilman Juan about my line of questioning that typically comes up about inflation and how that's impacting our projects, but seeing some of the international news around supply chains, I know we're talking about a baby formula shortage right now, and I'm always curious about how that impacts municipal projects like this. So. Well,
and to your point, though, you also have to control the things you control. And so back to the slide with all the text, we control the overhead percentage. We control what we pay our A&E firms. Yeah, we're about to bring legislation before you that selects 14 teams. We selected the phone book. And that's 14 teams with 14 joint venture partners and 14 arrays of DBE firms. And they're all very capable of doing a good job. I will go ahead and give you a spoiler alert. That's a play that I made twice in my career. and saw prices drop dramatically without even talking about price. The market responds to competition, and opportunity is good for everybody. And so we got to control the things we control. It's like my friends in golf say, small targets, yield small misses. And we got to get out of the gate strong and really controlling the overhead, controlling the spend on technical services, and then really measuring, are our bids coming in at our estimates? We don't want, if we start seeing bids that are 5, 10, 15% over, we might need to hit the pause button. And you even see, it was this week, GDOT was talking about pumping the brakes on some paving projects just until things stabilize. I don't know that we're in that posture. I think, we're going to immediately get into more of the design phase on the 2.0 program, which will allow some of this to settle down too.
My last question, I didn't realize that speed humps were an in-house product. I'm curious, are raised crosswalks also on the menu of projects we're able to do in-house? So, and if so, how possible is it to get those in communities in which we've already pitched legislation?
Yeah, so, at the risk of writing a check I can't cash, our guys are capable of anything. And we did our first speed table project on Chickamauga. They did great. And a raised crosswalk is nothing more than a speed table with a crosswalk painted on it. We do both of those. So if it's, and the work we did on Habersham was a relocation of a crosswalk after there was a pretty severe accident. So it was cutting back some limbs, replacing some ADA ramps, restriping the crosswalk, a couple stop bars, and some new signs. We do all of that in-house. So the minute you start talking about things like installing storm drain pipe, we don't do that. We don't grade and we don't pave. But if it's about the size of the bullpen in here, we do that, and we do it very well. And so that's what we were trying to do, is how do we capitalize on how do we expand those things? And I'll share, as a consultant, I spent 10 years just taking people who needed good opportunities, and our joke was, if you could show up to work on time, we'll take care of the rest. I think a move in-house is going to create career opportunities for people. And that's something that really should be a high priority for both the department and the city, because most of us will say, we didn't grow up saying, I'm going to get in the construction industry. We all kind of tripped over it. And for many of us, it's been a wonderful place, but never was it our plan to get into construction. So now we're trying to shove more people into it, saying, hey, come give it a try. It's not as horrible as you think it is. But yeah, if you look around at the basic maintenance items we do, we can conglomerate those into projects. It's going to be a resource question. Mm-hmm. But we're capable of doing anything like that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you, Commissioner Long.
And I think the key word you used a lot of times was competition. Thank you, Councilmember Dozier. The next speaker will be Councilmember Overstreet.
Thank you, Acting Chair Lewis. So, because we do communicate quite often, I don't have a whole lot of questions, but as always, I do appreciate your presentation. And I wanted to talk about that $15 million for Campbellton
yes, ma'am.
that you brought up. So I don't want to be on the 2040 plan, like Marta. I want to be on, like a 2022, 2023 plan. So I have thoughts. I always know I have great ideas of what we could do with that. And I would like to, get started on that like right away. I don't want to wait too long.
Let's definitely do that. And it's to share some of the sausage making. We are in constant communication with MARTA, and we fully support their efforts. And one of the things we talk about is, if there's ever anything the city can do, mm-hmm. One, give us enough time so that we can stay out of your way. But two, especially as you look at some of these transit projects, there's a lot of just basic transportation infrastructure, safe crossings, sidewalks, things like that, right. Even paving the street, that might make more sense, depending on the specific project, to fall on the city. And so that's what we talked about with Campbellton. There are things that we could do now that would then alleviate the burden moving forward, to your point that projects are wrapping up more quickly.
I agree. Again, I do have thoughts, so I'd like to get that solidified in the next 4 weeks for sure.
Well, you know my old boss very well, and she would probably choke me if we didn't follow through on what she told us to do. So
Okay.
that's there.
And I want to go back to the 311, because what I've been doing for the last 5 years now is communicating with my constituents and educating, because what I've found is that they are not going on social media to report potholes and pictures, and we're not even doing an excellent job, which your map shows, of using our cell phones to do it. So I would like for it to be, even more streamlined. I know we already have it so they can call star 311, but maybe there's a specific pothole hotline that we could have for for 9, 10, 11, and 12, because they will call that hotline for a pothole.
That's true. Yeah, and let's
It could
talk.
be temporary.
Let's talk about that, because I've got some ideas that could help, and it's really just identifying a code to say this is a pothole and this is the location.
Yeah.
And then it goes on the list.
Because even though when you go to star 311 or online with our 311.com or ATL311.com, there are a couple, other taps that you have to do other than going directly to the potholes.
Right.
And I need those reference numbers when they call my office. I want to make sure that they're capturing those reference numbers, and I want to meet them where they are. So if we could implement something so that they can call directly just for the potholes, just for during this pothole posse time. And I also think that we need to have like a media blitz about it.
Okay.
Like on maybe all of the major channels. And I know if you put that word out, then they would capture that and get that word out for everyone that use that number.
So you're talking about a pothole posse portal.
Pothole posse portal.
We
Exactly.
can work on that.
P3. But I think that'll make a difference. I really do. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you, and I'm going to yield the floor.
And speaking on that 15 million, Councilmember Dozier and myself, who both have some areas on Calverton Road, we can't wait to get 5 million of that as well. We got plans as well with it. Thank you. The next speaker is Councilmember Alex Warren.
I want to talk about that 15 million as well. On a different note, though, but I think what you meant was a pothole posse portal plan.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right, so the next speaker has to add another word after that. I did want to talk about the 15 million, though. So you had, no, not in a bad way. You had mentioned that based on the 2020 numbers, y'all started throttling back in terms of what the landing number might be at 270. So the good news is that we ended up at 30. Was the 15 that Mayor Bottoms earmarked, was it from kind of when we started anticipating we'd have it, or where's it coming from?
Yeah, so we never actually acted on those doomsday plans.
Right.
We developed them, set them to the side, and then it was the anxiously awaiting when do we activate them. And by fall we started seeing the numbers coming back, and for probably most of the fall, we were projecting a $10 million shortage, and we said, you know what, we can live with that. We'll make that work. And then as we got into last fall, and the numbers were bouncing on us, we realized, well, let's start looking at what this could really be. And in our minds, we call them we started calling them the Promise Kept projects, which were Campbellton, Phase 2 Cascade, and the rest of DeKalb Avenue. And if you recall, well, actually you don't recall, because in the fall we had those three on the bond list. And so then when we were projecting the additional monies on T-Splost, because Campbellton had been on T-Splost originally, we put it back. And so then it was just the rest of DeKalb Avenue and Cascade Phase 2 that are on the proposed program. And so it never really took a bite out of any of the existing programs, nor were we comfortable saying, well, let's move the whole, projected amount. So we moved, roughly speaking, 40% of it.
And so that's good to know. That I didn't realize that y'all hadn't really not started acting on the 270 plan. So 2015, we were saying it'd be a $300 million bond. We're going to land there, but a lot has changed. So I'm assuming, since I wasn't here, that the recalibration effort that that y'all undertook kind of got us back to where we needed to be to meet up at the $300 landing point, right?
Yeah, so after the rebaselining, we had been using a number of 260, and then right before the pandemic, we bumped that up, and so then it took a little nosedive. So we've been using 260, 270 for really the past 3 years, and it wasn't until end of last year, first part of this year, we said, it's this momentum is sustaining itself, and so what we said is, well, let's still be slightly conservative, but we know April is the last month, and then we came in at 303. And the thought was, well, let's be a little pessimistic, because we don't know and it just seemed like for 2 years we had COVID spikes July 4th and 1st of the year. I mean, we even quarantined all of DOT for 2 weeks in 2021, but it just seemed like we would think we were out of the woodwork, and then we'd have a spike, and we just never felt comfortable saying, well, let's run it to what we're projecting, let's hold back. But now that April's here, it's money in the bank. It's a real number now.
Okay, on page 18, you referenced XPI as an excellent metric. What is XPI? Sorry.
Yeah, so when we started looking at on the tail end of the rebaselining, this goes along with the promise what you say deliver what you say you're going to do. We had a lot of metrics on the program that didn't really mean anything, and so on the scheduling side, we for anybody who has some good PMI experience, you have a schedule performance indicator, cost performance indicator. What we decided was, well, let's develop our cash flow. So we mapped out where we thought the revenues were going to be. We matched our project spend to that revenue. And then we're comparing ourselves, how are we spending against our plan? And what we decided was that comparison, it incorporates the elements of both cost and time. And so our goal was to have an XPI of 0.9. If I showed you the dashboards that I use, we're 0.81 right now. And that's due in large part to me throwing the first wave of bids out on Cascade and doing it again. And then us making the decision that let's back up and incorporate as much bicycle facilities as we can on DeKalb Avenue. So those drags on the XPI are mine, but basically it measures are we spending against our plan.
The acronym stands for?
It's sort of cost times schedule.
The last comment I'll make is on, it's interesting that you made the remark about not liking to be compared to other cities. And I think when those kind of comments come up, it's not meant in a shame or punitive way. It's kind of a, what are they doing that we're not? And what strikes me is that as you're talking about your values and the actions you've already started taking in terms of bringing everything in-house and building the skills, you're kind of doing the same thing. I mean, you're looking at the staffing levels, the budget levels of these cities that are doing a great job, and you're mimicking it. So I want to flip that back around one more time and say, those comments and reflections are helpful because it allows us to support your decisions to add more staff, to add, bring contracts in-house so that we're not sending that money out, we're actually building your budget to do it. So, it's interesting because you're effectively doing it, but in a different, from a different lens.
Well, there's no doubt we're stealing best practices from other cities. Nothing's original. It's all adaptations of what's working in other places.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I got a few things. I did it the opposite. Typically, the chair will speak first, right? I'm going to start off by saying on the $15 million on Calverton, Councilmember Overstreet, what it shows is that our mayor, because you said who did it was our mayor, our former mayor. It shows how intentional she was about making sure Calverton Road will receive resources similar to how Councilmember Overstreet is now. And so
It's a very fair statement that I have felt. I had a mentor who referred to gentle pressure applied relentlessly. It would be an understatement to say I felt Campbellton pressure 24/7 for 3 years.
And I would agree with you. Even looking in the audience right now, a lot of these folks here right now are staring at me with Campbellton pressure. And so I'm glad. That's why when I first heard somebody say, is Marta here? Because Marta missed the last transportation meeting. The Campbellton folks didn't. And they ain't missed this one either. The next thing I was going to ask you about was the pothole posse. I ran into the pothole posse and made ATL Scoop.
Right, I saw that.
Last week, and I want to say they're doing an amazing job. The one question I had with it was the type of material that they're using, because I have been the southernmost portion of the city. I have East Point and College and Hapeville, and I border other cities. And if you look at the Campbellton, at the Conley Road area, I border Forest Park, and I'm able to literally look across the street at potholes in my district and potholes there in the other city, and we can tell they're using different materials. And so I'm wondering, is there something we could do, or is there something that we should be doing to fill the potholes with the different material that they're using?
So we're actually always experimenting with different materials. What you saw was just a typical mix that comes out of our pothole trucks. We're fortunate to actually have the equipment that we're putting hot mix down. Some jurisdictions are driving around with bags of cold patch. Our team has been experimenting with a product that I actually like that can actually be applied in the rain. I didn't believe it, and they put some down for me, and it's still in place. So that's certainly a moving target for us, because there are always advances on the material side. I would say that it's a lot of smoke and mirrors at times, but we're not shy about trying something new and seeing if it works. The big thing for us was the time that we would lose for wet pavement. And they rightfully so said, well, let's give this a product to try, because if it works, at least we're able to get, we don't want to be working in a downpour, but, we were losing days just because the pavement was wet.
Two more things I wanted to talk to you about is about standing on what Councilmember Juan said. When we looked at the other cities, I do compare, because I think we're the greatest city in the world. I don't think nobody can hold our jock scrap. And so when we compare and we see that 30-day limit with Atlanta, and I hear about how flexible you're being, you're tightening your belt. That's what I hear you saying. My grandmother used to tighten our belt. We didn't miss a meal. We tightened our belt. We might not eat everything we wanted that day, but we tightened our belt. I'm tired of tightening our belt. So I want you to come to us and tell us what you need. I know we accepted whatever you sent us the other day. But I want you to come to us with what we need, so that we can not have to tighten our belt, so that we can, when we can compare and we can continue to beat them.
I certainly agree with that, and you're going to have before you today an item that gets us right back in the game, and oftentimes the solution is to let go and let experts come in and do it. So we're going to be leaning on a partner, and I think you're going to see some very rapid improvements. And like I said, we're essentially doing in 18 months what would have taken 10 years.
And lastly, you talked a lot about competition. Did you talk to procurement about some of this stuff? You talked about 14 contract. I love that. I love that. But you talked a lot about that. Did you work with procurement on that?
We've talked a lot about that. It's been a challenge getting it off the ground. COVID kind of hit us hard. Right before the pandemic, we actually had a vendor fair, and the whole purpose was, let's get some of the big contractors who are reluctant to do work for the city back into the room and get them matched up with some of our local contractors.
You say reluctant to do work with the greatest city in the world. Who's reluctant to take our money?
Quite a few contractors were. In fact, I've shared this before, and I want to give a shout out to my finance team. I met with the Georgia Highway Contractors Association early after starting with the city, and they said there are 3 areas that they didn't like. Number 1, they didn't like our contracts. Number 2, they didn't like the time in which we paid our bills. And number 3, they didn't like our DBE program. And we told them, number 1, we'll clean up our contracts. And we did. And so we went to another jurisdiction and got a copy of theirs that they've been using for nearly 40 years and said, let's use this as a baseline. Number two, paying bills, we now pay nearly 90% of our bills net 30 days. If you go back a previous audit, that was a ray of sunshine that was never really talked about, was the fact that DOT pays its bills, and my good friend B at the airport still beats me by a couple days, but my goal was to be right in that same realm that he is, and where we turn it around. And as we talk about smaller firms, that's so important because we're having a direct impact on their cash flow. And then on the DBE side, we said that's non-negotiable. Learn how to do it. Embrace it. And their pushback was, well, it's going to cost you more. And our response is, we don't care. Embrace it. Bring new people to the table. And, from a external sales position, they're all taught to ask me, who are your favorite DBEs? And my answer is yes. Bring me as many as you can. And we have a success story. I won't speak for them, but one of our contractors called me and said, the relationships that we made on city projects, we now take our DBE partners to other jurisdictions where they don't have goals. That's what this is about. It's about building those relationships. Our projects are not super complex, but we need more getting into the pipeline, which I think really reiterates the point you were making that let's look at, back to that trigger to NTP, how do we get that down to 5 months versus 8? And there are a lot of moving parts in there. It's no fault of any one department. There's just a lot of moving parts in there.
Got to find, I know yesterday we found a bottleneck in the hiring process. We just got to find a bottleneck in this process.
And beyond
that's it.
Just fix it.
Yep,
and that was our attitude at DOT. It's nobody's fault. Fix it.
Got to fix it. All right. Thank you. If we have no more questions, thank you. And this will take us back to our regular agenda.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, will you please sound item 1?
Item number 1, 22-01333, an ordinance by Transportation Committee authorizing the mayor as designee on behalf of the City of Atlanta to enter into a lease agreement with Atlanta Airlines Terminal Company, a Georgia corporation, for the lease of parking spaces located at 606 Lake Mirror Road, Clayton County, Georgia, Hartsfield, Jackson, Atlanta International Airport, waiving the lease of city-owned real property requirements contained in Section 2-1547, Article 10 of the Procurement Real Estate Code of the City of Atlanta, as well as any other conflicting code provisions and for other purposes.
We have Mr. Biadora at the microphone, and
Good morning, Mr. Vice Chair and City Council Member B.B. Adari, Airport General Manager. Good to be here this morning. This is a lease with AATC, Atlanta Airline Terminal Corporation, to continue leasing this facility to them for a term of 5 years to operate, maintain, and provide other support service for employee parking. This is mostly airline employees that they have been parking here for many, many years, and we just want to continue with leasing that facility to AATC to continue that parking operations.
Mr. Johnson, please proceed. I'll look for a motion. Is there a motion? Is there a second? It's been moving properly. Second. Mr. Johnson, will you open the vote?
One moment. The vote is open. The vote is closed. 6 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable. Mr. Vice Chair, can we take items number 2 through 5, 7 through 9, 13, and 15 together as a block? These are all installation of stop signs.
Mr. Johnson, please proceed.
Item number 2, 22-01338, an ordinance by Councilmember Jason Winston authorizing the mayor or his designee to make the intersections of Cherokee Avenue Southeast at Orleans Street Southeast and Grant Park Place Southeast and Bass Street Southeast always stop controlled intersections, to authorize the Atlanta Department of Transportation to install stop signs at the intersections and for other purposes. Item number 3, 22-01339, an ordinance by Councilmember Jason Winston authorizing the mayor or his designee to make the intersection of Glenwood Avenue Southeast and Cameron Street Southeast an always stop control intersection, to authorize the Atlanta Department of Transportation to install stop signs at the intersection and for other purposes. Item number 4, 22-01340, An ordinance by Councilmember Jason Winston authorizing the mayor or his designee to make the intersections of United Avenue Southeast and Atlanta Avenue Southeast an always stop control intersection, to authorize the Atlanta Department of Transportation to install stop signs at the intersections and for other purposes. Item number 5, 22-0-1341. An ordinance by Councilmember Liliana Bakhtiari authorizing the mayor or his designee to make the intersections of Morgan Place Southeast and Alexa Avenue Southeast, Hooper Street Southeast, and Dawes Avenue Southeast, and Hooper Street Southeast, and Salmon Avenue Southeast, always stop control intersections, to authorize the Atlanta Department of Transportation to install stop signs at the intersection and for other purposes. Item number 7, 22-0-1347. An ordinance by Councilmember Mary Norwood authorizing the mayor or his designee to install an always stop at the intersection of Westover Drive Northwest and Brookdale Drive Northwest and for other purposes. Item number 8, 22-0-1348. An ordinance by Councilmember Mary Norwood authorizing the mayor or his designee to make the intersection of Dover Road Northwest and Rockingham Drive Northwest an always stop control intersection, to authorize the Atlanta Department of Transportation to install stop signs at the intersection and for other purposes. Item number 9, 22-0-1349. An ordinance by Councilmember Mary Norwood authorizing the mayor of his designee to install an all-way stop at the intersection of Habersham Road Northwest and Knollwood Road Northwest and for other purposes. Item number 13. 22-0-1353. An ordinance by Councilmember Mary Norwood authorizing the mayor or his designee to make the intersection of Wesley Road Northwest, Margaret Mitchell Drive Northwest, an always stop control intersection, to authorize the Atlanta Department of Transportation to install stop signs at the intersection and for other purposes. Item number 15, 22-0-1355. An ordinance by Councilmember Mary Norwood authorizing the mayor or his designee to make the intersections of Argonne Drive Northwest and Marne Drive Northwest an always stop control intersection, to authorize the Atlanta Department of Transportation to install stop signs at the intersection and for other purposes.
How does the department feel about these?
Safety is our business. Victory is incremental. I was just in another city and was appalled at how many all-way stops they needed as I was dodging traffic. So we strongly support this and recommend it for approval.
Is there a second? Alex Warren moved and made the motion, and Marcy Carla Overstreet made the second. Mr. Johnson, can you please open the vote?
The vote is open. Vote is closed. 6 yeas, 0 nays. These items are found favorable. This takes us to item number 6, 22-0-1343. An ordinance by Councilmember Alex Wan authorizing the mayor or his designee to prohibit parking in front of 145 Huntington Road Northeast in front of the entrance to Clear Creek Nature Preserve, to authorize the Department of Transportation to install signage at the appropriate location along the prohibited area per section 150-86 of the City Code and for other purposes.
Department have anything against this?
Yes, sir. We've reviewed this area and agree with the recommendation, so we support it.
Moved by Councilmember Ron, second by Councilmember Westmoreland. Open the vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 6 yeas, 0 nays. This item is found favorable. Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, if there is no objection from the committee, can we take items number 10, 11, and 12 together as a block?
The amendment, yes. Mr. Johnson, please proceed.
Item number 10, 22-0-1350. An ordinance by Councilmember Mary Norwood authorizing the mayor or his designee to install traffic calming devices on Argonne Drive Northwest, between Chateau Drive Northwest and Marne Drive Northwest, and for other purposes. Item number 11, 22-0-1351. An ordinance by Councilmember Mary Norwood authorizing the mayor or his designee to install traffic calming devices on Mornington Drive Northwest, between the west end of Rockingham Drive Northwest and Roden Haven Drive Northwest, and for other purposes. Item number 12, 22-0-1352. An ordinance by Councilmember Mary Norwood authorizing the mayor or his designee to install traffic calming devices on Broadland Road Northwest, between West Conway Drive Northwest and Northside Drive Northwest, to waive certain provisions of Section 138-84D of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances and for other purposes. And Mr. Vice Chair, these items need to be amended. The amendment to these items remove outdated references of Code Section 138-84D in the caption and throughout the legislation.
Moved Moved and properly second. Mr. Johnston, please open the vote.
The vote is closed. 6 yeas, 0 nays. These items have been amended. Mr. Vice Chair, we need to approve as amended is the next motion.
Been moved and properly second. Mr. Johnston, please open the vote. Mover was Councilmember Wan. Seconder was Councilmember Westmoreland.
The vote is open. Will everyone please vote? 6 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable as amended.
The chair recognizes Councilmember Wan.
Thank you, Commissioner. So with these speed tables, will these, do you anticipate with your increased capacity and skills inventory in the department, do you think these are going to be done in-house, or will they be done externally, and what's the time frame on them?
So initially, Mr. Councilmember, we're still using the old process, which is a little cumbersome. So really through the fiscal year, we create a list of approved speed tables, look at what gets budgeted, and then in the next fiscal year, we move to install them. So generally what happens is we start that procurement in July, and we're not working till spring, so it ends up being about an 18-month process. We certainly want to, some of these would certainly work just fine. I'm very familiar with these ones in District 8. And in residential areas, I think we would do very well. It's just looking at the resources that we have. But to your point, I think we need to look also at that process. So 2 years ago, we took the allocation that we received in the budget and set aside $500,000 for speed tables. It wasn't enough. Last year we did $1 million. We were able to knock out the whole list. This year we're looking at another $1 million. I've not sat down to look at the list versus the $1 million, but it should be. It was more than sufficient for this year. In fact, we were able to add a few extras, but it really is just balancing the list to what we get in the budget.
And am I hearing you correctly to say that in the FY23 budget that is before us, there is already $1 million baked in for speed hump installation?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Wan.
Mr. Vice Chair, this takes us to item number 14. This is 22-01354. An ordinance by Councilmember Mary Norwood authorizing the mayor or his designee to install traffic calming devices on Brawlin Road Northwest between West Conway Drive Northwest and Northside Drive Northwest and for other purposes. And this item needs to be filed because it's a duplicate of item number 12 on the agenda.
Been moving properly second. Mr. Johnson, please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 6 yeas, 0 nays. This item is filed by committee. Mr. Chair, can we jump to item number 17 and 18? These are also installation of traffic calming devices.
Please proceed.
Item number 17, 22-01364. An ordinance by Councilmember Antonio Lewis authorizing the mayor or his designee to install stop traffic calming devices on Rockwell Street Southeast and for other purposes. Item number 18, 22-01365. An ordinance by Councilmember Antonio Lewis authorizing the mayor or his designee to install stop traffic calming devices on Ward Drive Southwest and Polar Rock Place Southwest and for other purposes. And these items need to be amended. The amendment corrects the caption by deleting stop from the caption.
So move.
Second.
It was moved by Councilmember Lewis, second by Councilmember Overstreet. Please open the vote, Mr. Johnson.
The vote is open. Will everyone please vote? The vote is closed. 6 yeas, 0 nays. These items have been amended.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Vice Chair, we need a motion to approve as amended.
Moved by Mr. Matt Westmoreland, second by Councilmember Lewis. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 6 yeas, 0 nays. These items are favorable as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Vice Chair, this takes us to item number 16.
Please proceed.
22-0-1362, an ordinance by Councilmember Marcia Collier Overstreet authorizing the mayor or designee to enter into an asset purchase agreement with and a lighting service agreement with Georgia Power Company on behalf of the Atlanta Department of Transportation for a term of 1 year with 9 one-year renewal options, authorizing the city to accept $2 million and 0 cents in the form of a bill credit from GPC, waiving Section 2-1201 of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances, with all contracted payments to be charged to and paid from the fund, department, organization, and account number listed herein, and for other purposes.
Is there anything from the department?
Mr. Vice Chair, just a simple comment that this is the legislation that sells our lighting assets to Georgia Power. It was a brilliant idea from Doug Nagy and Jordan Dowdy on our team. They really were passionate about how do we use lighting to improve safety in the streets, and came up with the idea that let's sell the ones we have so that we can buy some new ones. And really want to thank Stephanie Grant and her team that supports us in the law department. This was not an easy negotiation, but we're here. So we're really excited to have this in front of you, and we recommend it for approval.
Mr. Vice Chair, we need a motion to amend. The amendment attaches the exhibits A, B, and C.
Moved by Councilmember Westmoreland, second by Councilmember Warren. Please open the vote.
The vote is closed. 6 yeas, 0 nays. The item has been amended.
Please proceed. Move approval as amended.
One moment.
Please open the vote.
The vote is open.
I do have just a quick question, a clarifying question. I know typically in the city we talked about who owns lights, and we used to kind of as a rule of thumb, the wood poles are Georgia Power, the metal poles are City of Atlanta. Does this change that formula, that back of the napkin?
So that rule's oftentimes not true, and the new rule will be the city owns nothing, and everything is Georgia Power's. Now, there could be some confusion, there could be some private lights in the mix, but the whole city versus Georgia Power thing, it will all be Georgia Power.
Fair enough. Thank you.
I recognize Councilman Warren, please.
Thank you. So I was quickly flipping through the amendments, and I'm seeing a different dollar amount. I'm seeing $2.5 million instead of $2 million in the caption. So is that, can someone just reconcile that for me, please? It's on the packet that we got. What I'd like to do instead, rather than gum us up, let me make a substitute motion to move this forward, approve it on condition of a reconciliation by Monday of the difference, or what is correct, and if we need a substitute on either the actual legislation or the attachments, we do that.
2 is the correct number.
And
the documents all say 2.5. So.
And second. It's been moved and probably second. Mr. Johnson, please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 6 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable as amended on condition.
And just working on a cadence, can you all hear me? My auntie just told me to sit up. So is this good? Yes. Okay. Mr. Johnson, please proceed.
This takes us to item number 19, 22-0-1369, an ordinance by council members Matt Westmoreland, Jason Dozier, Jason Winston, Liliana Bakhtiari, Dustin Hillis, Alex Wine, Andrea L. Boone, Michael Julian Bond, Byron D. Amos, Keisha Sean Waits, Marcia Collier Overstreet, and Antonio Lewis, outlining increased oversight, accountability, resident participation, and a commitment to improve project delivery for the Moving Atlanta Forward Infrastructure Initiative and for other purposes. And Mr. Vice Chair, this item has a substitute. I would defer to law to speak on the nature of the substitute.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Mr. Johnson, please open the vote.
The vote is open. Will everyone please vote?
The Vice Chair would like to recognize Councilmember Matt Westmoreland.
The vote is closed. 6 yeas, 0 nays. The substitute is before you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Acting Chair. Chair at the moment. If your auntie's watching, I almost put my jacket on so we could all look presentable. So first of all, I want to say a couple of thank yous. One is to the 11 folks on the body, including all of those assembled here, for co-sponsoring this legislation, and then second to our friends in the law department who worked very hard and late into the evening to make sure that the substitute we have before us is clean and tight and doesn't actually change a whole lot of content necessarily. It got the structure correct. And then there are some changes that I want to talk about for a second based on feedback from members of council and folks in the public, as well as departments who are going to be involved in implementing the infrastructure initiative over the next several years. So as quick background, everyone in this room is familiar with our infrastructure backlog. In 2015 and 2016, we went to the voters with the Renew Atlanta Bond Program and T-SPLOST to start making headway on that, and frankly have made a lot of headway. Every quarterly update, our Transportation Commissioner comes and provides us the latest about what has been done or hasn't. But as we went to the public to have conversations over the last 5 or 6 months about a new infrastructure initiative, we got a lot of feedback about project delivery, about project lists staying tight, about having appropriate budgets at the beginning, about projects not coming up after we've gone to the voters and asked for their permission to spend hundreds of millions of dollars, the timeline that it's taken for us to deliver, or in some cases not yet deliver, on several projects. And so 12 of us on council assembled this piece of legislation that was introduced last week to provide, as the caption suggests, some additional oversight, accountability, resident participation, and a commitment to improved project delivery as we move toward a May 24th vote on $750 million and then implementation in the years thereafter. The paper as it was introduced, which everyone is probably familiar with, binds the project list that will go before voters and is currently going before voters during early voting to try and address the concern that we heard that things were changing after we asked voters for permission to make a dent in our infrastructure project list. It sets up some guidelines as we issue bonds. The city will receive a bond premium and how we can be focused and thoughtful and true to the intent of this legislation in how we allocate those dollars in the future. We receive a number of progress reports already on various aspects of Renew and T-SPLOST, but this codifies quarterly updates that this department will get from the Atlanta Department of Transportation, that the CDHS Committee will get from the Department of Parks and Recreation, that the Finance Executive Committee will get from both the Department of Enterprise Asset Management and the Department of Procurement, so that we are doing a 90-day check-in on how we are delivering the projects that we are promising the residents of this city we are going to provide with the dollars that they are giving us. It sets up an annual audit that the city auditor will conduct to review both financials and product delivery. The discretionary dollars, each district council member receives a certain amount of dollars, and we received some feedback on the public about a desire to see those dollars allocated and then spent in a quick manner. And so this sets up a non-binding preliminary plan by the end of 2022 for district representatives to say that this is how they're thinking about spending dollars, but that can change. The original legislation said that we would encumber them by December 31st, 2024. We had a request from Chair Faroki to make that December 31st, 2025, which is incorporated in the substitute. It creates a 15-member stakeholder advisory committee that will meet quarterly to help keep us on track with appointments by the mayor, council president, and all 15 members of council. And then there's a new Section 9 that is in the substitute that requests the departments that I mentioned earlier, Transportation, Parks and Rec, Enterprise Assets Management, and Procurement, to provide to council in the future a delivery plan that will lay out the project scope, the materials that we'll be using, exactly what's going to be done in every project, and our estimated completion for design, construction start, and construction completion, so that the members of this body and our advisory oversight committee and the public will know what's coming and when. So with that, I will stop. Happy to answer any questions, and I really just want to say there are a number of residents who have understandable frustration about things that did or didn't happen over the last 5 or 6 years, and the ones who have come to this conversation constructively, saying, we know the city has infrastructure needs, we want you to have these resources, we just need a little more framework that you're going to be able to provide what you say you're going to provide in the timeline you're saying you're going to provide it. And as they prepare to go to the ballot box, I want to say thank you for their willingness to make a really big investment in this city that will pay off for decades to come. And I'm hopeful that this legislation will help us get there moving forward. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
And that was a brilliant piece of paper that you wrote, Councilmember Westmoreland. Happy to get that through. Happy to be a co-sponsor, but I ain't help. I did not help on that one. Thank you for getting that through. Motion to approve. Been moved by Councilmember Lewis, second by Councilmember Dozier. Mr. Johnson, please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 6 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable on substitute. 6 is item number 20, Section H resolutions, 22R 3434. An amended resolution by Transportation Committee authorizing the mayor as designee to execute an agreement for a contract RFP S1220072 landscape maintenance and debris control at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport with Ed Castro Landscape Incorporated on behalf of the Department of Aviation for 3 years, an amount not to exceed $2,988,000.00. All services will be charged to and paid from the fund, department, organization, and account number listed herein, and for other purposes. And this item was referred back to committee from full council on May 2nd, 2022.
I know that this was in committee before and it was referred back to us again. I want to file this paper. I move to file this.
Second.
It's been moving properly second. Is there a vote? We have one council member waiting to speak. Been moving properly second. Mr. Johnson, please open the vote. Oh, you get to speak first. I'm learning, y'all.
All right. B, I appreciate this. When I was one of the ones to support referring this back to the committee, it wasn't to just quickly file this. I have serious misgivings about the procurement process here. We have been a number of council members have been contacted about perceived irregularities or inconsistencies or just problems in terms of the evaluation process. Different components of it, some of which I did raise in a briefing, and I appreciate the briefing that y'all gave last week. But that's kind of what I wanted to have the opportunity to be able to discuss a little bit more. I mean, I will first off say, and I think I share this sentiment with a lot of my colleagues, I think none of us appreciate being put in this position. I mean, we should not be, and I'm not directing it at you, I'm just directing it at the whole process. We should not be the arbiters of procurement. We should not be the ones who are kind of raising the flags along the way. We should not be the ones that are trying to make a decision with what we feel is imperfect information. So I just want to at least put that first thing out there. We also don't want to be put in the position of penalizing the user agency when I don't believe it was necessarily the user agency's fault. I do think it was problems with the procurement. Now, in conversations I've had since then, the quandary we find ourselves in is that if we file this and go back out to rebid, we're just asking to have this entered what I consider to be a flawed procurement process that hasn't changed. And so or I'm trying to juggle this is, should my frustration be directed at curing the procurement process for subsequent and not penalizing this one, or is it that we need more time to figure this one out? I'm not, in my mind, I don't believe filing it right now is the right step for us to go. But I launch all of that out there. Mr. General Manager, I'd like to hear your thoughts or response to that, and I'd also like to hear procurement's thoughts on that as well.
Mr. B, please.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, Councilmember One. Per our, if there's a belief that the process is flawed, then we need to fix that that belief of flawedness to the process, not the user agency. So what we have done with this and all of our procurement is we follow the process, and the watchdog arm of City Council, the IG, went through our process, provide an IPRO report to this body supporting their findings of a process that was followed, and my recommendation for an award to the Chief Procurement Officer and to this body stays. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, what the process is in terms of procurement, I will ask the CPO if he would like to make any comment on the CPO process and OCC process.
Good morning, Martin Clark, Chief Procurement Officer. Greetings and good morning, committee members. There is a problematic action that has been placed into motion this morning in that a proper procurement process was executed. And let me walk you through the process, folks. We had 9 proponents on the solicitation, and unfortunately a number of them were found non-responsive to the requirements of our process, which this committee appears to be breaching that process. The City of Atlanta has had a very long and rich history of making sure that we are not the passive participants in discrimination against minority, women, or small businesses. This solicitation, committee members, required a small business participation goal. We made it abundantly clear within the written documents. We made it abundantly clear in the spoken instructions at the pre-bid. There's a small business participation requirement in this solicitation. We enforce our participation goals. It's one of the reasons why it's Atlanta's brand. We have a fantastically robust subcontractor participation program. And even on a deeper check, we provided this committee an opportunity to go into a deeper dive last week on the findings of OCC. And then long and the short of it, a number of proponents failed to meet the small business participation goals of this solicitation. And for some reason this morning, there was a motion to file this thing, even though the user agency, Department of Procurement, the IG's report recommended moving forward. So, while we want as many participants and bidders as possible in these procurements, we also must make sure that we enforce our subcontractor participation goals. And so again, we ask this committee to support this legislation and to move it forward. The procurement process was properly filed. It was reviewed by the IG's office, and a recommendation was made. And once again, I'm going to ask this committee to move this paper forward. I'm available for any questions.
All right, CPO Clark, you came out swinging, so I'm going to swing back. I mean, to say that I take real issue with your accusation of our breaching process, that's our job. I mean, we are the controllers of the purse strings of the city. We are directly accountable to taxpayers and voters. It is our job to to review. That's why this legislation is before us. So we are supposed to ask questions when they're brought to our attention. So like I said.
But you have stated that there was a breakdown in the procurement process, and there was not, sir.
I believe I said I had concerns, about that, and it's been brought to our attention, and that's why we're here to ask questions. And I also said I don't necessarily believe that filing it is the right step right now, because until, we should be able to ask as many questions about the process until we are satisfied.
Agreed.
So with that, though, I guess my question back to you is, within the process, as you see it, if these issues are raised and concerns, what are we supposed to do? I mean, again, we don't want to be in the position of being procurement.
Absolutely. And you should not be placed in that position. Within the instructions of all of our solicitations, committee members, there's a very, very clear requirement during the blackout period that these questions be raised and brought to the contract specialist. If that is the case, then those concerns are raised to me, and they are certainly documented within the file. Within this case, this is a very myopic problem. There's basically two issues that were found. Number one, it was whether or not these folks complied with utilizing certified small businesses, and they didn't, right? And then you also had an issue with regards to risk management, whether or not they provided the files that were needed for us to properly assess their risk management profile for this solicitation. That's basically it, folks. And so somehow, some way, I'm not so sure, what questions of procurement violations may have been placed on the table, and certainly not when. Hopefully, none of these potential vendors contacted committee members during the blackout period, because that would be in violation of our process and what is clearly written and laid out in the solicitation. Again, we take any and all concerns very seriously, and we address them immediately through our contract specialists. But again, very myopic issue here, Council Member Juan, on whether or not these vendors who were found non-responsive conform to the requirements of our OCC's small business participation goals.
I have two more questions. I'm going to yield the floor to my colleagues because I know they have questions as well. So in an instance during a procurement, during evaluation, it's my understanding that oftentimes it's a single evaluator who is moving through, or is it multiple?
Multiple.
Okay, and in an instance when they have made a determination of noncompliance with the requirement, is that reviewed, and ultimately is that decision authority vested in you?
Absolutely. So let's walk through that process. The process is really 5 steps, 5 basic steps, and part of the evaluation process requires the group to go through a criteria of scoring. And they have to reach a consensus on whether or not this particular vendor may have scored this amount or that amount. All of these things are, of course, reviewed by the Department of Procurement to make sure that there's no irregularities and that they are consistent. And 99.9% of these things are absolutely accurate. We have fantastic experts amongst our staff. We have fantastic evaluators that have done this for a number of years, so they're very good at what they do. If there is any question, we're really supposed to we really do deep dives if need be, Councilmember Juan.
So, kind of digging into that, so if someone gets a 0 number of points, that is a flag that gets raised with you to take a look at.
And what I'll even do, Councilmember Juan, is we'll revisit this. I mean, I will stress test these because, again, you guys are stress testing me, so I stress test them because I know I've got to deal with the questions. So we will stress test, well, why did they score so low? What was the deal on this thing? And, in pride of my fellow city workers, our folks are very good at what they do. I mean, they take these things very seriously, which is why, again, you may sort of sense that I'm, very passionate about this issue because I've got to defend this process because I've got to defend my coworkers who do a great job, folks. And so when, these things or this process is challenged, I take it very seriously, sir. When there is something that raises my eyebrow, I stress test these evaluators.
Okay. My final question, and I'll yield the floor, is should this move forward, walk us through the appeal process that the unsuccessful bidders have for remedy?
Sure. So it's going to be a two-step process. First, the proponents will submit a protest, which the Department of Procurement will review, assess, and then issue an opinion. Once that is completed, they can do a formal appeal where a procurement hearing officer will hear the administrative hearing to make a determination of whether or not the finding was correct. From that, Councilmember Wan, that could then go on to a litigation, a formal cause of action across the street.
Thank you. And just standing right there, how much does it cost to do a protest?
I think it's a 1% bond, I think it is, a bid protest bond, which is usually returned. And then, of course, whatever the filing, the appeal, I don't think there is a charge, but of course, whatever the cause of action is across the street.
Could it be $100,000 sometimes?
Potentially, if it is, a multi-million dollar proposed contract.
And how successful are people who filed a protest in winning that protest and in ever getting another contract again from us?
We do not discriminate against anybody that brings a protest. I mean, quite frankly, there are a ton of people that I see in these committees, Council Member Wan, who I've been across the table from, and they continue to get contracts. That's not how we play at the City of Atlanta.
Yeah, I'm new. I got to sit up again because I know how that goes.
I know. I'm conscious of my posture too because you're.
But I make sure I ask those questions as you keep moving. I'll have questions at the end. I'll have questions at the end. We'll move to Councilmember Overstreet. Who's next?
Thank you, Acting Chair Lewis. So my posture is bad because I'm not in a good headspace right now. I'm not happy. I feel, first of all, I really agree with what Councilmember Wan said. I don't like the thought of anyone saying that I'm breaching anything because I'm not, ever. I am a council member. I'm not in procurement. I am not a concessionaire. I've not bid on anything. I don't know when blackouts are because I don't bid. I'm a legislator. So I've not breached anything. And I don't understand that particular comment at all. I really don't. What I don't like also is being contacted about this exact same thing that we've heard over and over again about non-responsiveness for over 80%, like 80% of the bids. Why is it that we're still here? We're here again. Why is it that these contracts or bids can actually be submitted with so many omissions? Because I know I can't go online and order anything or submit anything and leave a blank. Not for an airline ticket, not for a skirt, not for an insurance, not for anything. You can't leave a blank and make a submission. Why are we still here? We should not be arbiters. We should not be mediators for our procurement process. And I don't feel good when 7 out of 9 bids are non-responsive. That takes away all competition. And I don't like that. I don't feel good about that.
Councilmember Overstreet, I can appreciate your frustration, but I also want to mention that we have made great strides at the Department of Procurement in making the process much easier. If you recall, we had actually many more non-responsiveness holdings at the Department of Procurement prior to us actually making the instructions easier, and also, for instance, making the top 10 list of reasons public to our bidding community as to the top 10 reasons why folks were found non-responsive. It was very, very effective. So we do get some that come through, and this was arguably an anomaly, but we have absolutely improved our non-responsiveness findings by making it easier. Not only that, in terms of the substantive reviews, for instance, like on IREA reports, I mean, we would be log-jammed for any of the council members that may recall. We used to always get non-responsiveness holdings on the IREAs, and we ended up easing some of the components and requirements on the IREA reviews to make sure that we got more and more substantive bids through the process, Councilwoman.
Sounds great, but we're still here. We're still here. 7 out of 9 non-responsive. We should not be able to submit contracts of this magnitude because there's a lot on the line. It's like a one and done. These are huge contracts. So it's not like they're regularly done. We need to make sure that more than 2 out of 9 are being considered. You've got to see that regardless of where the strides that we've made, we're still where we are. We shouldn't have 7 non-responsive. That should not even be an option for it to be submitted. I don't understand how we can continue to go in this. Who's the DJ?
Sorry, I don't know what's going on.
It's supposed to be me.
Sorry.
I don't want to be here again. I really don't. Because this is not a good space for either of us. Our customers, which are, our airport vendors, for the city employees, and that would be you and your department, or the council members. It's a bad place for us to be. We've got to do this better because we can't keep putting the onus on 7 committee members when we shouldn't be a part of that process at all. So I yield.
Thank you, Ms. Overstreet. Councilmember Waits.
Mr. Chair, I think it's very clear that there's a great deal of unreadiness, and so we're going to support the motion to file.
Thank you, Councilmember Waits. I wanted to say a few things as well. It's not you. It's not the airport. It's the system. 7 out of 9, you just said, I just heard you admit that is abnormal. That's not normal. And so we don't like that portion of the system. When you look at the council, I know you also mentioned that we've been through this before with council members. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 of us are brand new. You found a bottleneck with the person who was brand new on the last council. We got a new council, and we went to one department meeting in which the department's head said they never seen this many council members sitting in department financial meetings at one time. Got an active council. We're investigating this stuff. Mm-hmm. It don't look right to us. And that's all we're saying, like 7 out of 9, why we can't help them. We got people in our city who, because when Mayor Maynard Jackson was here, they were teaching folks how to be responsive, not non-responsive. We weren't trying to get you non-responsive. We want to see you be responsive. When I just heard the department head for transportation talk about bidders, 14 bids, and he smiled gleefully by having choices, I want to give the airport, because he also said that they're doing better business with him in a lot of ways and effectiveness in the way they're doing it. I want to give them that many choices. And if we get 7 out of 9, I want us to call those 7 and tell them, like, you can't submit this application without signing your name. Or who's your small business person? This Atlanta. That's what we do. And that's what I'm hopeful we can get back to doing. Because we got a mayor who talks about transparency. I know what I stand for. And I'm happy to hear other council members are the same way. So that's how I feel about it. And being called breaching, I didn't know that. I felt offended by that fully. Thank you. I'll be the one more speaker. Sorry.
All right. colleagues, I'm not sure that filing this is the right action. I think if there is unreadiness and we want more time to dive into this, the appropriate motion would be to hold it. The one question I want to do before I put that substitute motion forward is in regard to the user agency in terms of timing. Is there an urgency on this? Because if there is, I'm reluctantly willing to think about moving this forward with no recommendation to give y'all, through Monday, but my preference would be to hold. So, Mr. General Manager.
Council Member One, the previous landscaping contract that we have, my team said it's a truck and 2 men. They were not performing, so the level of service as you enter the world's busiest and most efficient airport, it has to represent who we are in Atlanta. You're coming to a welcoming airport that is aesthetically pleasing, and we're preparing you for that journey. We had to terminate that contract. Right now, I have a special authorization from this body on a month-to-month service, providing that service along with augmenting with some of my maintenance staff from the airfield. That's scheduled to end in June. If this paper is not moved forward, then I will have to come up with other methods to continue the landscaping procedures at the airport, because, of course, we cannot let the airport go to the wayside. So we'll find means to get it done, but June is my end date on this here.
And you said you can. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so again, I don't like being in this position. That was the very first comment that I made about this. Y'all have put us in probably the worst spot that we possibly could. So I'm going to go ahead and try a substitute motion to move this forward with no recommendation, to give y'all until Monday there's only 6 of us here, but there's going to be 15 on the floor on Monday to try and field more questions and get us to readiness. I'll try that and see, and if not, then I'll come back with another substitute motion to hold.
So that I'm clear, right? We have talked about the process and what needs to be done. That is a procedural issue with what's in place right now. That process is still in place, Councilmember One. So what do we do between now and Monday? I have always maintained we need to work collaboratively to examine if there's perceived issue with the process, to work in fixing that process. We need to fix it if there's issues. We need to fix it now. We cannot do it because we have a lot of legislation coming on the pipe that will be following the same process. And so whatever that is, we need at least a working group to work and fix it. But there's not much from a user agency that I could do between now and Monday, sir, about the process.
Yeah, that's I expressed that earlier too. I mean, if we file this today or we reject the contract, we're just basically asking y'all to start the same process with the same flaws and potentially the same result again. I think what we might need to do is, depending on if this motion succeeds and we go to full council and it gets approved, then where we need to focus our energies is on the procurement process again, and contract compliance and the Inspector General just tightening this up, because this is, I appreciate Ms. Overstreet's comment about it can't keep happening again. So my motion is to move this forward with no recommendation.
Mr. Wan, thank you, Ms. Keisha. Next, Ms. Waits.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to delay the process. However, I fully support a work session to look at some of the things that the airport has discussed. And again, I share Mr. Oman's concerns. However, I think there is unreadiness, and for that reason, I support the motion to file today and continue with the work session to allow all parties to weigh in so that we can get this right. Thank you.
And I have a question for the airport. You also mentioned, can you handle, you said you can find a way to figure it out while you process this. Is this something you can, if you tighten your belt, because everybody in this office has talked about tightening their belts. I ain't never heard about y'all tightening y'all belts because y'all so good at what y'all do.
So our belt is extremely tight.
So my request, y'all are so good. My request is just my question, not my request. My question to you, and I'm going to be very specific, my question to you is if we file this motion for just so everybody can hear, because we're uncomfortable with how with some of this, we don't know everything going on. So if we were to file this motion, could the airport handle this as we speak and we work with him, or we do whatever we're supposed to do to get this done? Could y'all handle, like similar to how the transportation department has started to do speed tables, because we asked them could they do speed tables, or do they want to continue to contract out this work to get a fair bidding process? Because all we're doing is asking them to rebid. If this contractor was going to win, they can win it again. To fix this right, could you handle this for a month?
So I will be coming back to this body because I will have to look at options out there, landscaping options either under the city contract right now, so that I can do a special or an emergency authorization to augment my team to continue this service. But remember what we're talking about here. Going back to the process, if there's this notion that the process is flawed, and I go back out tomorrow to resolicit if you file this paper, I'm going to be following the same process again.
Okay, thank you. We have a substitute motion on the floor. Mr. Johnson, can you please call the vote? Oh, do we have a second?
No, Mr. Vice Chair, we don't. The motion on the floor now is to forward with no recommendation. It was probably motioned by Councilmember Wan, and we need a second.
All right. Then I'll withdraw that motion and make another substitute motion to hold.
We have a motion on the floor to hold. Is there a proper second?
I'll second that.
Second by Councilmember Dozier. Please open the vote. Mr. Johnson.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 3 yeas, 2 nays, 1 abstention. This item is held. Yes.
Mr. Johnson, please proceed.
Item number 21, 22R, 3576, a resolution by Councilmember Marcia Collier Overstreet authorizing the mayor's designee to apply for a fiscal year 2022 U.S. Department of Transportation multi-modal project discretionary grant opportunity, discretionary grant in amount not to exceed $180 million and 0 cents for the construction of the Campbellton Road Corridor Transit Project and for other purposes.
How's the department stand on this?
Yes, sir. One thing I would share is that Campbellton has been and continues to be a priority of ours. And as we look at opportunities for federal funding, Campbellton's always front of our mind. So this is an opportunity for us to be pursuing federal funds for this corridor, understanding there are still some technical items to discuss, but that shouldn't preclude us from chasing funding. So we think it's a very competitive candidate project and recommend this for approval.
Okay, thank you. 180 million, Ms. Collier. Ms. Collier Overstreet. The next speaker will be Councilmember Waits.
Sir, this is non-germane to the legislation, but later in the afternoon or wherever we are, can the Transportation Department speak to whether or not you have an apprentice program for residents to gain valuable skills with respect to growth and needed positions that we need to fill? So I'd like to hear more about that later, the appropriate time. Thank you.
Sure, I could actually answer that.
But we want to move this legislation forward. My apologies.
Sure.
Next speaker.
So back to the regularly scheduled programming. Yeah, this is something that I truly believe in, of course, not just because of the fact that we are, leaving no stones unturned, but for as long as I've been on council, I've always said that we should always maximize our grant capabilities. And this is just that. We're making sure that we are capturing as many dollars as possible for areas that need it the most. And for that reason, I move approval.
It's been moving properly. Second, Mr. Johnson, please open the vote.
Mr. Vice Chair, can you repeat who seconded the motion?
It's been seconded by Mr. Dozier. I'll be better with that. Moved by Ms. Councilmember Overstreet, second by Councilmember Dozier. I'll be better with that, Ms. Tail.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 6 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable. Item number 22,
22R3580, a resolution by Councilmember Alex Juan authorizing the mayor's designee to apply for a fiscal year 2022 U.S. Department of Transportation multimodal project discretionary grant opportunity, discretionary grant in amount not to exceed $70,656,000.00 for the construction of the Atlanta Beltline Northeast Trail and for other purposes. This item needs to be amended to attach a fact sheet provided by the Atlanta Beltline.
Is there anything from the Beltline? Any comments?
Sure. We just welcome the opportunity to partner with the city once again to apply for federal funding. As y'all know, Congress recently passed a bipartisan infrastructure law. There's a historic level of federal funding coming to help us with infrastructure and transportation needs if we compete for it here in Atlanta. So we are looking to move forward and build out 2.7 miles, help close the loop of the Beltline corridor, and make a stronger connection to Lindbergh Station, MARTA's fourth busiest station, with this grant for $70 million.
And quick question, does this affect MARTA's application for grant money with the federal government?
We will all be competing together, and there's no reason why we can't be competitive enough here in Atlanta to pull down both of those to be successful in both applications.
No, we've typically given MARTA most of the exclusive rights for that. Does the department, how do you feel about this?
So, Mr. Vice Chair, we operate on the Al Davis philosophy of just win, that money coming to Atlanta is money that's not going someplace else. I do believe we are in what I've called a golden era for transit, and that many of our transit projects, be it Beltline or MARTA, are appropriately teed up to be very competitive. And so we support both agencies, and I think we're going to win too.
I think this is the first time MARTA is going to have some competition from in the city. Excited about that. Councilmember Juan next.
Yeah, clearly I'm obviously supportive of this, but we need to amend this paper to attach the fact sheet, so I move to amend.
It's been moved by Councilmember Juan, second by Councilmember Westmoreland. Can David, please, Mr. Johnson, please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item has been amended.
Move to approve as amended. Second.
Been moving properly second, moved by Councilmember Juan, properly second by Councilmember Westmoreland. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable as amended.
Mr. Johnson, can we please proceed?
Item number 23, 22R3582, a resolution by Transportation Committee authorizing the mayor as designee to execute a consent to sublease agreement with Worldwide Flight Services Incorporated for the sublease to DHL Express USA Incorporated of a portion of the lease premises located at South Cargo Building C, Hartsfield Jackson Atlanta International Airport, and for other purposes.
So move. Any discussion from the department?
No change to our lease term.
Okay. Antonio moves. Councilmember Lewis moves.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Dozier. It's been moved probably second. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 6 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Please proceed.
Item number 24, 22R3583, a resolution by Transportation Committee authorizing the mayor as designee to enter into contracts RFP-S1210282, General Engineering Services. Contract A with ACOM Acura Joint Venture. Contract B with Gresham Smith plus Platinum Geomatics Joint Venture. Contract C with Atlanta Transportation Solutions Group. Contract D with Transport ATL Joint Venture. Contract E with KH-SAY Joint Venture. Contract F with RSH Benchmark Joint Venture. Contract G with HNTB SERM Design Collaborative Joint Venture. Contract H with WSP Luster Joint Venture. Contract I with Arcadis BPA Joint Venture. Contract J with Atlanta Transportation Partners Joint Venture. Contract K with Pond Roehead Fox LLC, Contract L with Atlanta Mobility Professionals, Joint Venture, Contract M with Barge WRJ Joint Venture, and Contract N with Visioneering Partners Joint Venture to provide engineering services to the Atlanta Department of Transportation on a task order basis for an initial term of 3 years with 2 one-year renewal options, and to add funding to a joint task order fund in an amount not to exceed $25,000.00, with all funds to be charged to and paid from the project account numbers listed herein and for other purposes. And Mr. Vice Chair, this item needs to be held to receive the IPRO report.
Department have anything?
Yes, sir. We had actually mentioned this earlier. We had 14 excellent teams respond, 14 responsive submitters. We've selected all 14. I would suspect this IPRO effort should not take long because we're selecting every reputable firm who came to do work for the City of Atlanta. So we're very happy about this one.
And you've talked to procurement about this already?
Yes, sir. This is actually our second effort. We canceled the first one due to some non-responsiveness issues.
So we've done this before. We've canceled one before due to non-responsive. Okay, thank you.
We have.
Thank you. Been moving properly. It's been moved by Councilmember Juan, second by who? Moved to hold by Councilmember Juan, second by Councilmember Overstreet. Mr. Johnson, please open the vote.
One moment. The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is held in committee. Item number 2522R3584, a resolution by Transportation Committee on behalf of the Atlanta Department of Transportation to amend Resolution 18R3632, adopted by the Atlanta City Council on May 21st, 2018, and approved by the operation of law of May 30th, 2018, for the purpose of adding an additional funding source and for other purposes.
And I understand that we have a motion to amend this to attach an IPRO report.
No. That's the next item, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay. So is there a motion is there anything from the department?
No, sir. This is just some administrative cleanup. We're adding a funding source.
Okay. Thank you. Moved by Councilmember Juan, second by Councilmember Dozier. Mr. Johnson, please open the vote.
One moment. The vote is open. Will everyone please vote? The vote is closed. 6 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable. Item number 2622R3585, a resolution by Transportation Committee authorizing the mayor's designee to execute an agreement for IFBC 1220225 with Matthews Kelly Joint Venture Airfield Sewers Enhancement Grades 4 and 5 at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport on behalf of the Department of Aviation in an amount not to exceed $9,068,551.17. All services will be charged to and paid from the fund department organization account number listed herein and for other purposes. And Mr. Vice Chair, this item needs to be amended to attach the IPRO report.
Thank you. I was seeking a motion. Anything from the department?
Second.
This is critical for us. We got to fix it. We got to get it done.
Okay, perfect. It was moved by Councilmember who? Councilmember Juan, second by Councilmember Westmoreland. Mr. Johnson, please open the vote.
The vote is open. Vote is closed. 6 yeas, 0 nays. This item has been amended.
Been moved by Councilmember Dozier, second by Councilmember Westmoreland. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. Vote is closed. 6 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Please proceed.
Item number 2722R3586, a resolution by Transportation Committee authorizing the mayor's designee to execute an expedited enforcement compliance order with the Environmental Protection Division, Department of Natural Resources of the State of Georgia, and to authorize payment pursuant to expedited enforcement compliance order in the amount of $2,250.00 to resolve unpermitted discharges at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport from January 1st, 2021 through January 31st, 2022. The charges will be charged to and paid from the fund department organization, the council number listed herein, and for other purposes.
Anything from the department?
We had two sewage spill, mostly liquid, no solid. And the reason for the spill was when we discovered the spill, we vacuumed all the lines out. The lines are good. It was just clogged with rags and bottles and other material that does not belong in sanitary sewer lines. So some of the liquid got into Mud Creek, and EPD came out, looked at it, and assessed a $2,500 fine, which we think
That was self-reported.
we always self-report whenever we have any, because our environmental program is so robust. Anytime we have any issue with environmental issues, we automatically report it to EPD.
Thank you. I'll move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Lewis, second by Councilmember Dozier. Mr. Johnson, please open the vote.
The vote is open. Vote is closed. 6 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable.
Johnson, please proceed.
Item number 28, 22R3587, a resolution by Transportation Committee authorizing the mayor's designee to execute an agreement for RFPS 1220033 with A Action Janitorial Services, LLC at Hartsfield Jackson Atlanta International Airport on behalf of the Department of Aviation for a 3-year term with 2 1-year renewals in the amount not to exceed $1,469,888.36. All contracted work and services will be charged to and paid from the fund, department, organization, and account numbers listed herein and for other purposes. And Mr. Vice Chair, this item needs to be held to receive the IPRO report.
Moved by Councilmember 1, second by Councilmember Westmoreland. Mr. Johnson, please open the vote.
One moment. The vote is open. The vote is closed. 6 yeas, 0 nays. This item is held in committee. Item number 29, 22R3588, a resolution by Transportation Committee authorizing the mayor's designee on behalf of the City of Atlanta to execute an encroachment agreement with ACEF-MSP Juniper LLC for the purpose of installing permanent underground shoring and tiebacks into the Juniper Street, 11th Street, and 12th Street rights-of-way at 1081 Juniper Street, Northeast Atlanta, Georgia, 30309, and for other purposes.
Anything from the department?
Mr. Vice Chair, this is a typical encroachment agreement. The developer and contractor are working to build some retaining structures and need access to the right-of-way. So we support this and recommend it for approval.
Moved by Councilmember 1, second by Councilmember Lewis. Mr. Johnson, please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 6 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable. Mr. Vice Chair, we have one item coming off held. It is item number 35 on your agenda. 22R3435, a resolution by Transportation Committee authorizing the mayor's designee on behalf of the Department of Aviation to enter into an appropriate contractual agreement with SP Plus Red Bridge Joint Venture for RFPS 1220141, Parking Operation Management Services at Hartsfield Jackson Atlanta International Airport in the amount not to exceed $2,473,996.71. All contract work will be charged to and paid from the fund, department, organization, and account numbers listed herein and for other purposes. And this item needs to be amended to attach the IPRO report.
Move to file. Move to amend.
We have a mover and a second.
Moved by Councilmember 1, second by Councilmember Overstreet. Mr. Johnson, please open the vote. Do you have any comments from the airport, anything from the...
So the vote is open.
Let's amend it first.
Vote is closed. 6 yeas, 0 nays. This item is amended.
Mr. Vice Chair, I would like to move this, make a recommendation to hold this paper for another cycle.
We support that. Move to hold by Dozier, second by Councilmember Waits. Mr. Johnson, please open the vote.
One moment. The vote is open. Will everyone please vote?
vote is closed. 6 yeas, 0 nays. The item is held in committee. And Mr. Vice Chair, that concludes our legislative items for today.
Councilmember Overstreet has something to say.
I just have a question. I'm trying to see why you want to hold it. Just
I was a little bit confused because Vice Chair moved to file the paper, and I don't know the reason for that. Or was it to file because of the IPO, or was it because of the IPO?
I'll tell you why.
so that's why I was just wondering.
And the clarification between filing a paper and holding a paper is very,
Definitely,
very
they're different.
distinct.
Yeah,
right?
they're different. But I just wanted to understand your readiness or unreadiness. That's all.
I am ready. I'm
because-
ready with this paper.
Okay, so you're ready to send the paper,
Yes.
but you just didn't understand where the file came from.
Correct.
Same. So okay, we just I want to.
I'll tell you why.
Oh, okay. Councilmember Lewis wants to speak, so I'll yield.
Similar to the landscaping contract earlier, when we thinking about like people being non-responsive, this one had 3 people who actually applied for it. Only 1 got through. Only 1 was deemed responsive. So that's a horrible percentage. I love when the transportation commissioner is here talking about how he likes a assortment of bidders. This is 1, and he also just mentioned that when he received less bids, he turned it back. They did it again. He just said that I didn't even know that the department could do that. So I implore the airport to do that sometimes when we get 1 bid responsive. Thank you. But 1 second, Councilmember Overstreet still has the floor. Sorry.
Yeah, so I didn't see that on the iPro. So I want to make sure we're talking about the same legislation.
Right. We are.
I didn't see that.
The CPO would like to make a comment, please.
Okay, you are correct, Councilwoman Overstreet. These 2 were not found non-responsive. They were scored, all 3. All 3 were scored.
All 3 were scored.
And it has
What
an
non-responsive
NR
again?
under it. They were scored, and they still have non-response. It's unclear from the scoring if the 2 of the 3 vendors that has NR under it, because they have a final score, but they also have an NR under it as well. So if you look at no other paper looks like this. This is when you talk about. He said something was abnormal about the last one. What was abnormal about this one was that if you look at the last one, the non-responsive folks don't have scores. If you look at other papers, the non-responsive folks don't have scores.
Okay.
On this one, they had scores, and it says non-responsive under still. NR.
Can you speak to that?
Sure. We actually forwarded all of the bids through to the Office of Contract Compliance and the Risk Management Office to consider what the bids. Unfortunately, for 2 of the bidders, they did not provide enough information to be able to have risk management to give them any higher scores. And so they ended up getting 0 scores on those, but they were not found non-responsive by the Department of Procurement. We actually let them.
So what Councilmember Lewis said was that both were denoted on.
They were found on the risk management scoring. Councilwoman Overstreet, they were not given a score. And so as a consequence, they were not the highest scorer on this bid.
Okay.
But again, you are correct. It wasn't a non-responsive holding. They were all 3 were scored. We wanted to get as much competition as possible.
Okay.
And also, this paper has been held before, so it's been held before.
Mm-hmm.
We were waiting on the iPro report, sir.
Yeah, and we do have the iPro now.
Yes.
So I'm going to let my colleague speak, and I'm going to try to find what he's speaking of.
Next speaker, Councilman Waits.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, as I indicated, that there just seems to be some unreadiness. So again, that's one of the reasons that we made the motion to hold, which I also believe Mr. Bedore is in support of. And so I think we need more time to work out some of the details and dynamics, and we're all in support of that.
Thank you again, Mr. B. Councilmember Alex Warren, do you have anything?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so help me understand here. So what Mr. Lewis is speaking to is that in the procurement scoring, there was something that was marked NR. Is that correct? But yet they were just given 0 points for that?
That is correct. The Department of Procurement, again, in the process, we do a preliminary review of the documents to see if the documents are there, whether or not they were responsive to our document review. We ended up allowing all three parties to be reviewed by both Office of Contract Compliance and the Risk Management. And unfortunately, two of them ended up getting zeros on the review by Risk Management. The NR is inconsequential. The long and the short of it, we did not find them non-responsive. We allowed them to go through the process to be reviewed, scored, and evaluated. Again, in line of trying to get as much competition as possible, Councilman Wan.
So that is unusual, though, right? That there would have been that marking on. I mean, again, I'm not seeing any of that in the documentation, but
not necessarily unusual. Again, they did not provide the information that was needed for risk management.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
So here's a situation where I'm actually on the other side of this, where there's a difference between a bid being just summarily disqualified and potential irregularities around that versus a bidder who's just gotten no points for it because the documentation provided was insufficient. And I feel like that's the area that we're wading into in this particular situation. And while, again, the fact of the matter is that there were three contractors that were fully scored. Mm-hmm. The decision was based on that. None were disqualified, but again, the unfortunate thing is two of them received zeros on a particular category. I would caution council in terms of inserting ourselves too far into the specific procurements. I think in an instance where we have lingering questions, as in the other paper that we want more clarity around in terms of there's a difference. I do feel like there's a difference here, and my vote to hold this was based on the general manager's offer to do that, rather than not understanding that his was just a reaction to a motion that was placed before us. So with that, I'm going to put forward a motion to reconsider this paper and see where that goes. If not, then we have 2 weeks to think about it.
Second. Councilmember Wan, the item is already held. So you can leave it on held.
No, I'm asking to reconsider so we can vote on it today, potentially.
Gotcha.
Okay, so we're throwing these terms around, and I agree wholeheartedly with Councilmember Wan. We're not procurement, so I'm really stating this today. Full stop. We can't be put in this situation anymore. But now I'm clear that the non-responsive is different from not responsible. Is that correct?
They are different.
And again, because we're council members, that's something that you're going to need to explain to us.
Sure.
As far as this particular paper is concerned.
Absolutely.
And we don't have to have that class today. I'm very frustrated today, actually, with all of this. It's too much. And I think it could be avoided 100%. And that's the part that's frustrating for me, is because we really are, world class, most efficient, and we can do better. So I'm going to yield and stop where we are. And
I have a motion to
and I think that
you made a motion?
and it was seconded by Dozier.
I think Councilmember is a motion on Councilmember Waits was speaking next, but I don't remember recognizing the motion. Councilmember Waits, you're next. Huh?
So, I yield.
Yeah, just for clarity, Mr. Chair, I didn't put forward a motion to reconsider this item. It was seconded by Dozier.
Pushback. Do I have the floor, sir?
You have the floor.
Okay, so it's very apparent that there is some unreadiness. That's one of the reasons that we asked for a work session to address some of the issues that we're having. It's been expressed multiple times that it is not our role to be involved in the procurement process, which we are not. The actual general manager put forth and made a recommendation to hold, which I think is the appropriate thing to do today. And for that reason, I'm not sure why we are going back and forth about this. And so for that reason, I think it's appropriate to recognize the general manager's recommendation, which is to hold it. It simply buys us more time to put together a work session. Secondly, our chairman needs to also weigh in on this conversation as well. And so for that reason, I think it's important that we move forward and request a work session to address some of the issues that we've seen throughout this conversation this morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Council Member. Brother David, because you my helper today, you're leading us. Where we at right now?
We have a motion to reconsider by Councilmember Juan and Councilmember Dozier.
It's been moving properly second. Mr. Johnson, will you please open the vote?
One moment, the vote is open. The vote is closed. 4 yeas, 2 nays. The motion is reconsidered.
Can we hear from the airport?
So based on the vote, I just want to mention something in the scoring process. All the proponents were scored appropriately. One submissions did not receive a score because they did not provide page 5 of Form 3. Which is very clear. The very first paragraph in the form says, failure to provide all this information will deem you could deem that to receive a score of 0. The second proponent that also received a score of 0 also failed to complete that form. It's very, very clear in the form again. And so as a result of that, the only choice that was left for the aviation department is to make a recommendation to make an award to the company that was most responsible in their submission. And that's what we have done. And so I have no further comments.
I got a couple of comments. So when you just said that you were forced to only look at one bidder. When you received the bids from the contract.
We received 3 bids.
3 bids
and
to
we
look
scored all 3 bids.
And procurement scores the bids, right?
And OCC's procurement reviewed the bid. We score the bids, and then the bid goes on to 2 additional scoring. A scoring from OCC. OCC scored all 3 bids. And Finance scored all 3 bids, but 2 of the 3 bids received a 0 score from Finance because of their failure to provide the appropriate financial documents.
Same thing we were saying on the landscaping thing. When we talk about sheets, missing one thing, filling out an airport ticket, trying to fly out of town, and you can't not put your last name because you can't submit it at that point. Same thing we've been talking about earlier, and I feel like now we're having a work session in our committee meeting.
And Vice Chair, I'm not going to debate the procedure again. We talked about the procedure, but it's also incumbent upon the proponent to make sure they do due diligence. So if we have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people that are doing due diligence in making sure that their submissions are fully in compliance with the standards that are established, then why not the other? And we go through all the training and we go through working session and they have ample opportunity to answer questions. So it's more discussion that needs to be had if there's concern about this process.
If you did all that stuff and these folks who are good at their job and they still miss 2 or 3 sheets, we have issues on ours. Not you, Mr. Airport. We have issues on our side.
I think the issue is 360 because if you have an incumbent that failed to provide the needed documentation, something is wrong. Because when they won the previous contract, they followed the same process. They did their submission in accordance with the established rules and regulation. Second time around, when you're a contractor at this airport, it's not a passage of right for us to award. You've got to be competitive. These are competitive awards that we're looking at. And so if what went wrong with an incumbent being deemed not responsible for failure to submit documentation.
But when I just heard the transportation chair tell us that when that happens to him, he likes to see a lot of bidders. He sent it back. That's what I just heard him say. And so I'm saying that out of 3, only 1 was deemed, and that's totally different in my opinion. But thank you again. The floor, we have a board member waiting to speak. Mr. Juan, council member.
Yeah, I think you're pointing out some of the gaps in our procurement process, and then obviously the user agency have discretion in terms of when they obviously always have the opportunity to cancel a procurement and restart if they aren't satisfied. So I think that's what you're hearing from Commissioner Rowe. So with that, now that it's back before us, I'm going to make a motion to approve as amended on this particular paper.
It's been moved and properly second. Mr. Johnson, please open the vote.
One moment. The vote is open. The vote is closed. 4 yeas, 2 nays. This item is favorable as amended.
Mr. Johnson, please proceed.
Mr. Vice Chair, that concludes our legislative items for today.
Move to adjourn. Moving properly second. Let's go.